Hello and welcome back to my series of lectures on source analysis. And we'll just go back through the next task in a quick minute. But first I want to start with the source analysis mat that's here. And it's about, let me see, page 5 of your source skills booklet. So before that, you should have just done a little bit of definitions and some of the questions that we might ask sources. Okay, so just a few things to go through. Some of the things that are going to be useful to help you in the next task and also for future source analysis is sort of sitting on this little map that we have here. We know we have our types of sources, our original and our primary and secondary, and really they're, again, not just good because they're primary or bad because they're secondary. We try and judge them on their own merits, and sometimes primary can be more useful talking about our things that happen at the time, and secondary is very useful, of course, for telling us about, how we might analyse or look at the longer term impacts. So one of the key terms that you'll like to know, especially for this task that we're going to go through in a minute, is called provenance. You looked a little bit at that in your inquiry, but really we want to know where the source comes from. We need the author, the publication, and the date. When, who, and why. What type of source is it? Where does it come from? And why was it created? They're sort of key questions that you want to have in your mind when you're selecting sources, when you're having a look at them to answer questions. And then we need to analyse it here, which is the sort of the purple box. Have a little look. You can annotate the source. What can you see? Why do you think it's like that? What's the message? So what is the source telling us? Are there things that aren't in there that you know should be from your own research? Then we need to, the other thinking skill behind this is evaluation. Is it subjective? Is it objective? How far do we agree or disagree with what the source is portraying? How useful is it? Again, is it strong for us to use in evidence as evidence, or is it a little bit limited? Is there bias? Is it, designed to persuade and therefore it shouldn't be trusted like a propaganda piece? And then on this side, again, just using some of the keywords: origin, motive, perspective, usefulness, reliability, audience and content. There's a few extra words that you can put in your toolbox there. So we want to look at how reliable the source is. Now we look at this in more detail next year. It's just a sort of, this is where we're headed to. Is it correct? Is it trustworthy? Does it have an exaggerated viewpoint? But everything shows us what people thought at the time. So it's sort of the balancing act. All sources are useful in some ways. So you just need to look at what the advantages are and the disadvantages. Some sentence starters here. Maybe this might suggest, it appears to, this could mean, it seems to indicate. Sometimes this language works well because we're not really 100% sure, for instance, what the purpose of a source might be. So we might have to look at the most likely purpose because we're never really there at the time that the source is created. So sometimes we've got to sort of make educated guesses based on what we already know. So here's a nice little anagram for you, a nice little sort of mnemonic you could remember. So source, where does it come from? The provenance, the date, the author. Objective, why was it written? So this kind of connects to purpose for us. Usefulness, how useful is it? Reliability, how reliable is it? Context, how does what you know fit in? So where does the sort of that background knowledge that we know about what's happening at the time fit in? Example. Now, examples are key, and we're going to have a look at that next, because when you have a look at the source analysis assessment, you will get extra marks for using examples from the source in your answer. So definitely take a look at that. Let's move on down now to what we actually are wanting you to do in this task. Now, this is the source skill booklet. You will have a task sheet that your teacher can go through with you, but this is the essential task. What you're actually doing is we are going to basically test you or test your skills at putting together a source document set, and also how you are interpreting the sources, because everyone will see them in a slightly different way, and that's why it's quite good to make sure you have evidence. So for this one, you're going to find your own sources. Now, typically in a source set, you would have seen this last year, you would have sources that have been chosen for you, then you answer unseen questions. This is the opposite. You're going to choose the sources. Well, actually, you already have the sources from your inquiry. And we are going to give you the questions in advance. And if you were interested in continuing on with modern history, that actually is the basic way that we do source analysis. You do get a source set and the questions are known, because it's not really a memory test. It's about, well, what am I looking at here in this source? How am I interpreting it? How am I going to use it in my research? How am I going to analyze it? That's the skill, not so much remembering questions and remembering a lot of content. So those thinking skills are going to be really important as we go along. So you will have questions that you will see in a minute. These are the questions that you will be in your assessment. So no tricks there. What you guys need to do is select 3 sources and make them into a Word document. And I've put the little tips in construction are in bold. And of course, you're listening to the lecture now. Now, the key thing about this is it's a lot easier if you choose a theme. Okay, so I have chosen the Industrial Revolution, and I'm looking at sort of the technology aspect of it. All right, it's way easier. It's very difficult to analyse a source set if it's all over the show. So, for instance, if you decided to make one source on World War I battles, another source on the home front, and another one on Anzac Day, you are going to really have a problem with it. That's why it's probably the best way to do this is to use your inquiry sources. You don't have to find new ones. You already have some good background information, and that will set you up to complete your assessment very well. Okay, so you are constructing the document booklet, and I have a sample here for you. So going through, I have chosen source 1. Now, the first thing is you must have the date of publication, a title, who published it, and if you can find it, the author of the source. Excuse me. If you don't have all of the information, then use the words approximately or circa, and a brief explanation can also help. So sometimes it's hard to find all this information. If you look here, I've gotten all these sources from the textbook. So Henry Ford, in My Life and Work, 1922, on his ideas for building a car for everyone, not just the wealthy. That will help you as well. If you can put your origin, your date, a little bit about your source, that will help you down the track when you've actually in the assessment, in the end class, and you've got to answer the questions. So here is the source. I will build a car for the great multitude. It will be large enough for the family, but small enough for the individual to run and care for. It will be constructed of the best materials by the best men to be hired after the simplest designs that modern engineering can devise. But it will be so low in price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one and enjoy with his family the blessing of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces. So this is talking about making the car affordable to most people, not just the wealthy, which is something that Henry Ford really pioneered. Okay, that's my first source. I've decided for my second source, I'm also going to have, I'm going to now have a visual source. It's up to you how you break it down. You can do visual or you can do written, but you should have a combination of both. So here we go, a nice little clip there, an engraving from the late 1890s regarding the impact of the discovery of electricity by Thomas Edison in 1879. So again, this kind of invention, we had the car, its affordability, now I've got electricity here. And then my third source is a picture of child labourers. In the image, the boy is too short to operate the machine and must stand on top of it in order to reach the spindles. Now you can see here that I've got circa 1903, and that's because I actually can't find the proper date for this, but I know that the camera was around. I've had a look at some similar pictures and I'm putting circa to approximate the date. Now I know it's not the 1800s because that would then be an engraving or a painting, and then I've just kind of explained what's happening here, and that's more on sort of child labour. So again, it's still an invention. So we're looking here at the spinning jenny. So it is still in the same theme as the others. Now you only need 3 sources. Okay, so I've got my 1, my 2, and my 3. But it's not just about choosing sources willy-nilly. It's about choosing the best sources to answer the questions. And we're going to get to that in a minute, but I just want to quickly show you how you would present different formats of sources. So moving down, these are just other source types. If you have some that are different to the others above, you can use a speech or dialogue from a documentary. You've just actually got to look at the different conventions that we use. Okay, so for instance, I've just got a speech by Harvey Broadbent, and it's like, basically it's an historian, it's an interview, and you use italics and quotation marks to actually say, well, this is speech. And you can see there, we've done that. And if you've got little bits you want to leave out, if it's too long, you put the ellipsis, the ... Whoops, which is that bit there. I'm just kind of hovering over. Okay, so if you want to use sources that can be put into a Word document, clearly, because you've got to actually take this in hard copy with you into your in-class assessment. Okay, so it's got to have a hard copy component. So if you want to include a documentary or a video clip, you will need to find a visual as well as a brief explanation, because then your marker will be able to see it. So I've done that here with Apocalypse World War I, and I have a review or a little blurb there as well. Okay, and that's just clipped off the internet. So again, it just shows your marker that this is what you're looking at. Okay, but just double check with your teacher when you're using documentaries, because you might just be able to clip some of the actual, you might be able to take some dialogue out, and that might be easier, or you might be able to take a screenshot and use it as a picture. They are a bit trickier to actually use in a source set, so I probably would check with your teacher if you're going to use this one. Okay, so what we're going to look at now are the source questions, and I'm just going to leave it there because I'm going to pause the lecture and we'll have a new one for the source questions. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask your teacher. Thank you for listening.